Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, May the 8th, 2025. Germany has a new Chancellor, and I want to look at this event. I want to consider the moment that Friedrich Merz was sworn in as Chancellor and consider what kind of a chart it is, and also look at how things might develop. Is it looking good for Germany, or does this chart suggest that things could go wrong quickly? And I will be looking at all of that later on in this video. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, May the 8th, 2025. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. And here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York time. And the moon is now in Libra. In fact, the moon went into Libra at 6 minutes past 8 London time. So that would have been 6 minutes past 9 if you're in Germany. So if you're in the Americas, moon went into Libra, right at the beginning of the day, sort of middle of the night. I think 6 minutes past midnight if you're in California. And even if you're in Europe or Africa, moon goes into Libra pretty early in the day. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then the moon won't go into Libra until this evening. So that's probably the main event today. And also, just before the moon went into Libra, it did make an opposition to Saturn, and so that moon opposition Saturn could be a little difficult. It may be that we feel we can't express ourselves in quite the way we would like. And actually, if we look at the moon's movement, we do have a few planets quite close together. We've got Saturn, Neptune, and Venus, within around 7 degrees of each other. So the moon, as it moves from Virgo to Libra, is making oppositions to Venus, Saturn, and Neptune, and that may suggest a certain amount of strain over the course of the day. And we also, once the moon moves into Libra, we have an opposition between moon in Libra and Venus in Aries. So that might conflict us sometimes. Are we going to be ourselves, or do we have to compromise? Do we have to think of other people, or should we be selfish? So those are the kind of questions we have to think about. And with the moon in Libra, looking at it in isolation, moon in Libra tends to be about balance. Obviously, it's in Libra, and we're trying to balance ourselves to whatever is happening around us, and finding that balance isn't always easy, but we try our hardest, and we don't want to be in a situation where we're constantly having to recalibrate ourselves to fit in with changing circumstances. That can be quite exhausting. So really, that's the main stuff going on. There isn't a huge amount happening. The moon will make a trine to Pluto as well. Moon trine Pluto is perhaps about trying to change the way things are, but in a gentle way, because it's a trine. So I don't think that's necessarily especially dramatic. I do think that today might be a little bit calmer than yesterday. All things being equal, but it depends on the precise situation. So that's the picture for today, for Thursday, set for New York. If we reset that chart for Sydney, Australia, slightly different picture because the moon is in Virgo for most of the day. So if you are in Sydney, Australia, then the main aspect is really going to be an opposition between the moon and Saturn. And you could say between moon and Uranus. So moon opposition Saturn may dominate the day, and as a result of that, you might feel that it's quite difficult to get things done. And you may feel that you're being blocked and there is resistance, and that resistance may not be just be material resistance, but it could be just emotional resistance, feeling that you don't necessarily want to do certain things, or you just don't feel in the mood, or you feel that something is being blocked. But moon opposition Saturn, it is a short-term aspect, and by this evening when the moon moves into Libra, things should be easier. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system, and so we still have that Earth sextile Mars. It's not exact anymore, but with Earth sextile Mars, it continues to be a time when we can get things done, when we can move things. If we feel that something isn't right and we want to assert ourselves with Earth sextile Mars, I think we can still have an impact. And additionally, Mercury is making a sextile to Neptune. In fact, Mercury is making a trine to Uranus and a sextile to Neptune. So Mercury is hitting these sort of outer planets. Those two aspects, they could be quite inspired. We can sort of pick up on the vibes, what the universe is trying to tell us to do, what is the message of the universe, and it may be relatively easy. But of course, if things are easy, they can be overwhelming. So just because we reach a conclusion, doesn't necessarily mean that we should follow it through. Perhaps it's more a question of just feeling what is happening, observing it. Though with Mercury trine Uranus, there is a possibility that we can speak in quite a dynamic, even quite explosive way, and maybe people will listen to us if we can be a little bit dramatic. And that's about it. So I don't think heliocentrically there's much else to report, or at least much else that I have noticed. I've probably missed something, but that's about it. Just a reminder here that heliocentrically, Neptune is getting very close to moving into Aries. I don't know whether it makes a real difference in the same way that geocentric Neptune is moving into Aries, but so heliocentric Neptune is at 29 degrees 52 Pisces. So very soon Neptune will move into Aries, and so that's just really going to reinforce the concept of Neptune in Aries when it's both geocentric and heliocentric. But as I said, I'm not entirely convinced about heliocentric signs. I have to give that some more thought. So let me now look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, May the 8th, 2025. Aries. Aries, the moon is now in Libra. It's in your opposite sign. And so, with the moon in Libra, you may feel that you have to pay some attention to other people and, what other people are doing, or at least more attention. And to begin with, that might be quite irritating. It's something you would prefer not to do. But if you don't take into account other people, it may be just difficult to get things done effectively. You want to do a good job, and if you want to do a good job, then you have to take into account different people with different attitudes and different priorities, and so it's probably worth making the effort. And the moon in Aries, moon in Libra, the moon in Libra makes a trine to Pluto. So you don't have to take things as they are. If you're not happy with the way things are configured socially, you are in a position to create change, and you can create change in a way that's quite subtle. you can slowly sort of move things your way, but you have to be slow about it because you have to take into account other people's sensibilities. But I think at the moment you can do it. And also, in terms of the way you carry yourself, I think that you can be quite effective. I think that in most cases people are going to listen to you, and they're going to take you seriously. And in some cases there may be something about you that's actually quite indispensable. What would happen if you weren't around? Well, maybe nothing much would happen at all. Maybe there would be a great feeling of emptiness. So Libra, do value yourself, and also value your contribution. And additionally, when you are dealing with people, don't take things at face value. I think that is important. The moon is making an opposition to Neptune. The moon is actually making an opposition to Neptune, across the main axis of your chart. Moon in Libra, opposition Neptune in Aries. So there is the possibility here of confusion. It's perhaps a situation where you want clarity, and you want clarity in a hurry. And so if you want clarity in a hurry, that means you take the first thing that looks clear. And sometimes things that look clear, that look obvious, are not obvious at all. So when you're looking for simplicity and clarity, don't force it. Sometimes things just are confusing and they don't make much sense. And short term, perhaps you should just accept the situation. Taurus, you've got quite a lot of things sorted out, but you haven't got everything sorted out, and there are a few things that are up in the air and don't make a great deal of sense. And that means that you have to take the time to work it all through, and that might require a bit of effort on your part. And you have to additionally be aware of things that you just don't understand. There's actually quite a lot you don't understand, and in fact there's quite a lot that all of us don't understand. I have Taurus rising, so I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you. And so if there are things you don't understand, then firstly accept the situation, and then do something about it. And what do you do? Well, I don't think it's necessary to ask lots of questions. That's not necessarily going to give you what you're looking for. What you can do is make sure that everything which is in your power and which is under your control is as straightforward as possible. So that might mean that things should be better organized. And if you're feeling a lack of harmony, that things are just out of place, then that's a sure sign that they really are out of place, and that you should do something to create order around you. And that might feel difficult, where do you start? But if you just think about that sense of balance, if something is in the right place, is working well, you're going to feel balanced. If you're in a state of imbalance, then that's a sure sign that something needs to be changed. So that's perhaps the way you should work through the day. Just just sorting things out, in your own way, and allowing yourself to make things as easy and straightforward as possible for yourself. And in the process, I think that you may get a certain amount of help from other people. The help might be indirect. Not everyone knows what's going on. It's probably not a time for trusting people absolutely, but I think that the way you conduct yourself is pretty good, and people will respond well to you. And if you need to, you can make new friends, you can make new contacts, not in a dramatic way, but you are at the moment someone who is actually relatively easy to get on with if you make a little bit of effort. So from a social and interpersonal level, I think that today could be quite effective, but in a somewhat understated way. I don't think that today should be especially dramatic, and that should make you happy. The last thing you need at the moment is drama. Gemini, the moon is moving into Libra, and from a Gemini perspective, moon moving into Libra is a good thing. I mean, obviously, Libra is an air sign, and when the moon is in Libra, you're feeling good about yourself. You can see possibilities, and there are things you want to do, and there are things you want to change, and you can be very creative. And the moon in Libra is actually making a trine to Pluto. So got Moon-Pluto trine, that Moon-Pluto trine in air signs, therefore having an impact on Gemini, which is your sign. And so, you don't have to be satisfied with what is in front of you. And if you feel that it's all a bit boring, it's not going the way you'd like to, well, you can just change it. And you don't have to change it in a dramatic way. You just have to start to do things your way and allow everything else to fit in around you. At least that's the theory. That's the way it should be. Now, I'm not saying that there's not going to be a little bit of resistance. The moon in Libra, it does make an opposition to Neptune, it does make an opposition to Venus, and with those two oppositions, you could find that certain people are confusing you and are trying to maybe persuade you to do something you don't want to do. When I say people, I'm probably not talking about specific individuals. It's more what the group wants. So if you are a sociable Gemini, things could be more difficult than if you're, say, a hermit. So if you're a Gemini hermit, I think it's going to be a great day. You can just do what you want, and I don't think there'll be any resistance. And you can create change where you feel you need to create change. If you're heavily involved with other people, then it could be more difficult. And you may actually reach the conclusion that if you really want to get anything done, you need to do it in your own way, and you need to have a little bit of distance. Now, there is a difference between the group and the individual. So dealing with people en masse, a group of people, that's hard work today. Dealing with people on a one-to-one level, that's not so bad. I think that's much easier. I think that you have enough charisma and charm to be able to persuade particular individuals to do things your way, and you can be accommodating enough without having to abandon any of your plans or your ideas. So you don't have to be a complete hermit, and the key relationships in your life can be very profitable. But what you don't want to do, I don't think, is just to completely surround yourself with other people, because I don't think in that situation you'd get anything useful done, and I think you might just feel an overall sense of dissatisfaction. Cancer. Cancer, you're starting to feel that you want to move away from things. And the day starts off with an opposition between the Moon and Saturn. So, Moon-Saturn opposition. This Moon-Saturn opposition, by the way, is going to be especially strong if you're in Australia and New Zealand. If you're in Europe and particularly America, it's more about the very beginning of the day. But Moon opposition Saturn can be difficult, and it's a situation where you feel that you may be blocked, that you can't do everything you want, and you find that certain people are just not being helpful. They are maybe resisting you, they could be contradicting you, or else you might just feel an obligation. And if you feel an obligation and you're putting other people first and you yourself last, well, that's not a perfect situation, is it? So Cancer, I would suggest that relationships are treated with a high degree of caution, and everyone every person has the potential to block your progress. I mean, it could happen. So if you can be self-reliant, I think that would be a good idea. And it just may be the case, Cancer, that you have to free yourself from something. It may not even be a person, just something that is just holding you back, is preventing you from being yourself. You just have to free yourself from it, and then that makes things a whole lot better. And then the Moon, separates from this opposition to Saturn, and it gathers a bit of strength in Libra, and that is about you and what you would like to be doing. You want to be somewhere where where you don't have to worry about what you're being told, and you just want to feel sort of safe and secure. And it could remind you of of your animal, the crab. The crab wants to be safe in its shell, and if you're a hermit crab, needs to find a shell. You want to be somewhere where you feel comfortable, and it might then be the case that you need to resist outside temptations and suggestions. Moon making an opposition to Venus, making an opposition to Neptune. That could be about things coming in from the outside world. You can feel the pull of the outside world, and that might especially be the case from a career view. Maybe employers or other people like that, or authority figures, are trying to tell you to do something, suggesting that you move outside your comfort zone, and you don't really want to. And the suggestions of supposed authority figures are not necessarily very useful. You might think that people in authority should be taken seriously, and I'm sure they should be, but you don't want to take them too seriously, and you don't want to drop everything to make someone happy, or to feel that you don't want to get into trouble. You do have to put yourself first, and once you're involved in something, then stay with it. I think that really is important. So Cancer, do look after yourself, and probably the aspect that you should be really thinking about is a trine aspect between the Moon and Pluto. And this Moon-Pluto aspect is very introspective. It is introspective, but it's also quite transformative. And when you're alone, somewhere you feel comfortable, then you can start new processes, and these processes will have an emotional feel to them, and they'll also reflect your fundamental independent mindedness. And so you're doing things your way, and you're developing your view of the world, and your understanding of your security needs is very unique. And you just make a few changes, you make the right changes, and you don't do things other people's way. That's not today going to be especially helpful. Leo, today you might be a bit accident prone. That is a possibility. I mean, I don't want to make too much of it, but I don't think, Leo, it's a time for doing anything that is especially risky, or for doing something you've never done before. And also, you should avoid people who have a reputation of being troublemakers, because if they've been troublemakers in the past, they can be troublemakers again. And so ideally you want to stay out of trouble, unless that's something you want. If you feel that now's the time to be creating drama and crisis, well, then go ahead. That's up to you. But in most cases, it's probably something you want to avoid. Still, Leo, you do have quite a lot to say for yourself, and there are a lot of things you might want to talk about. You're not always going to actually know what you're talking about. The moon in Libra is making an opposition to Neptune, and so with moon opposition Neptune, then sometimes you can say things and you think you know what you're talking about, but as the words come out, it becomes increasingly clear that there may be certain crucial facts you have misunderstood. So probably a bad idea, if you can possibly help it, if you can possibly avoid it, to, for example, make presentations, or if you have to say something that's really important, it may not always work out. Though the moon is making a trine to Pluto, so that moon trine Pluto does indicate that if you really try, you can be quite persuasive, but your persuasiveness might nonetheless be based on a lie or something that is untrue. That doesn't mean to say that you are deliberately lying, but you can somehow distort the facts just a little bit so that you can get your way. So there is that possibility. And I should point out that it can work both ways. So, conversation is a two-way thing, and there may actually be a power dynamic with moon trine Pluto. Someone is going to persuade someone else. I think it can be you doing the persuading, but it may be the other way round. And if you're faced with someone who really knows their facts, someone who really knows what's going on, then, or at least gives the impression that they do, then it's going to be quite difficult for you to say no. It's going to be quite difficult for you to resist their logic. And so, that might be another reason to avoid heavy conversation about things that are really important, because you just might not have what it takes to look after yourself and your own needs. I think if you're in the Americas, then late in the day, this evening, it might be a different picture. Very late in the day, the moon starts to make a trine to Mars, and with that trine to Mars this evening, that might be the time when you really start to come into your own, because Mars is in Leo, and so Mars is in your sign. And so if you've got something important to say and you're in the Americas, then leave it as late as possible. And maybe if you have a contact with someone at sort of 9 o'clock in the evening, or even later, then that might be your time. That might be a time when you can really make yourself clear. So That would be the only situation. So yeah, if you're a Leo and you're in America and you're a night owl, then it should be okay. So that's the broad picture. Additionally, if you're traveling, short distance traveling, with Moon opposition Neptune, things might go wrong. Even if you take a journey that you've done a million times before, and you do it today with Moon opposition Neptune, it might not quite go to plan. It's even possible you get lost. Could you get lost? Well, probably not if you've done the same journey over and over again. But it's always possible, isn't it? So overall, it's a day when probably you just need to be careful. And what I said right at the beginning, don't forget, you may be slightly accident prone. And that is a good reason not to take risks. And not just physical risks with other people. Where there is a contact, where there is an argument, where there is a discussion, there is just a possibility that things could go wrong. Virgo, you are perhaps feeling the strain of an opposition between the Moon and Saturn. And that would be especially the case if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but I think you're going to feel that in Europe. In the Americas, maybe not so much. So, Moon opposition Saturn, may remind you that not everything is easy, and that certain people can be problematic. They can hold you back. And you try to be yourself, and you try to be reasonable, but still, some people are just a problem, and the reason they might be a problem is because you are underestimating them. You're not taking them seriously enough. You're not making the effort to really understand another person's motivation and who they are and what they're trying to achieve. And because of that lack of effort, you might get yourself into a situation where you are surprised and not particularly happy about the surprise either. So at the beginning of the day, certainly, and perhaps all day if you're in Australia or New Zealand, then make a special effort to understand people and to understand how people can mess you up. Now, as the day progresses, the Moon does change sign. It moves away from that opposition to Saturn. Well, unless you're in Australia or New Zealand, in which case that Moon opposition to Saturn, you could say, defines the day. But as when the Moon moves out of Virgo, moves away from that opposition to Saturn, it moves into Libra. Things are possibly more down to earth. When the Moon moves into Libra, it can often be a time when Librans have to think about money, or perhaps they have an opportunity to do things useful with money. The Moon is making a trine to Pluto. So Moon trine Pluto can be about financial organization. It sounds very simple, very boring, but Moon trine Pluto allows you to reorganize your finances, to completely look at them in a completely different way. And in the process, you might be able to make savings. You might see that there are more effective ways of using your money. And if you haven't got money, then you may discover there is actually a way of making money, perhaps, that hadn't occurred to you. But you have to be prepared to look at your finances in detail, and that can be very difficult, can't it? Particularly if you're not comfortable with your financial situation. But even then, looking at your money, looking at bank statements is going to be a really useful exercise, and spreadsheets. And again, it may not be something you want to do, but you're a Virgo. Surely, as a Virgo, you can handle spreadsheets, and you like that kind of thing. Okay, I know that's a bit of a bit of a stereotypical view of Virgo, but sometimes things that are obvious, it's obvious, and sometimes the stereotypes actually work. And that aside, I think that Virgo, you're actually quite effective. You're in the sense of being, charismatic. I think that you know how to get on with people, and part of the reason you're able to get on with people is it's because you start to make the effort to understand them. I said at the beginning of this piece on Virgo that you do need to make more of an effort. You can't take people at face value. You do have to take time to understand what people want and what makes them tick. But once you do make that effort, then you really start to see the benefits, and your ability to relate is, I think, very good. And if you can start to relate to people, that may give you an opportunity to explain what you want. You can bring to bear who you are, and what your individuality is all about, and what you like and what you don't like, and you can do it with a certain amount of emotional intensity, and this emotional intensity will, I think, be greatly appreciated. But if anyone is going to make things complicated, it should be you. Some things are complicated, and sometimes you need to get down to the details. What you don't want is other people to make things complicated for you. That is something that they could do, and you have to really listen to what people are saying and how they're explaining things. And sometimes people are just going to make things needlessly difficult, and at the same time you might start to think that someone is trying to hide something. And the moment someone starts to trying to hide something, you'll just know it, just intuitively. And so always be aware of those complications and the way that other people could be trying to make things complicated. And as soon as people start to make things complicated, then you kind of need to stop the conversation, or at least you need to demand clarification. Because if you don't get clarification, then how can there be progress? And you'd just be allowing other people to to follow through their agenda. But I think that would be unnecessary. You do have a hidden power, and if you're able to tune into this hidden power, I think that you'll have a day when you really are in control. Libra, the moon is moving into your sign, and with the moon moving into your sign, you're probably feeling a lot better. I don't think you really appreciated the moon moving through Virgo, and it might have felt that you just weren't quite yourself. And now with your moon in Libra, you can be more outward going, more forthcoming, and people will notice you more, and you won't mind being noticed so much. And when the moon moves into Libra, it does make a few aspects. It makes an opposition to Neptune. It makes a trine to Pluto. It makes a opposition to Venus. So the question is, which of those aspects are you going to concentrate on? So I think you should give yourself a choice here. The temptation might be to focus on moon opposition Venus, moon opposition Neptune. And in other words, we've got a Venus-Neptune conjunction still in Aries, your opposite sign. And so with moon opposition Venus, moon opposition Neptune, there is a danger that you allow yourself to be confused by other people, and you do things other people's way because it's easier. And that can be a Libran approach. Libra is looking for balance. Libra, doesn't want to be out of balance, and sometimes it's just easier to do what people say. And there is a temptation in that direction. And it's also the fact that Venus is in Aries. Venus, your ruler in Aries, is it's like you're in enemy territory. That's how it can feel, Venus in Aries, if you are a Libran. And so, yeah, you can concentrate on that if you want, but I don't think that's really what you really do want to do. I think it's better to concentrate on the fact that the moon is trine Pluto, and moon in Libra trine Pluto can actually give you power, and you can not have to worry about the machinations of other people. Moon trine Pluto can be about you doing something to define yourself and to define your sphere of influence and your sphere of interest and what you want to do, and not having to worry about outside pressure. So what is it you want to do? How do you want to enjoy yourself? With moon trine Pluto, you can find something that is really quite regenerative. So if you've been feeling sort of under the weather, or you've been feeling under pressure, then moon trine Pluto you can restore yourself. But if you're going to do that, you just have to avoid external pressure. People telling you what to do, thinking that there are things and people you have to accommodate. That is not helpful. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, the moon is opposition Venus across the main axis of your chart. Moon in Libra opposition Venus in Aries. Now that aspect might actually be quite good for relationships, but it has to be a relationship where you are respected. And if there's any lack of respect, or even a suspicion of a lack of respect in a relationship, then it should be avoided. But that doesn't take away from the fact that on a social level, you are pretty effective at the moment. You know how to project yourself. You come over as someone who is pleasant, and people are gravitating towards you. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. If the wrong people are gravitating towards you, well, that's not what you want. But that needn't happen. And I think that if you choose your company carefully, then I think that things should be fine, and you can enjoy yourself. But you don't need other people to enjoy yourself. You can just be yourself, and you can be happy. Scorpio, you possibly feel that you've done enough, that you don't really have to do much more. And Mars is your ruler. Mars has had a fair amount of emphasis recently. I mean, it's in Leo, especially if you're a Scorpio. It's in this very high-profile sector of your chart. So you feel the pressure, and you're also aware of the possibilities. But sometimes you need to take a break, and you need to take store of what's been going on, and hence that feeling that maybe you've done enough. And so today, and maybe even tomorrow as well, you shouldn't feel that you have to be super active. I mean, you probably shouldn't be creating things that are new. Maybe instead you should be sorting out what's already been done. I mean, that might be a problem, that things have moved quickly and you've been creating a lot of possibilities, but you can't just keep creating. You need to balance it. And so, it's sort of yin and yang. Sometimes you just have to take what you've already done and put it all together in sort of quite a quiet way, and not allow yourself to be distracted. And that might be the best way of handling today. And it doesn't mean to say you can't be useful, but there shouldn't really be any pressure, ideally. I mean, for most of the day. There is a bit of a change late in the day if you're in the Americas. So late in the day, the moon does actually start making a sextile to Mars. So I don't know what you're doing this evening, but this evening in the Americas, you might find that actually you start waking up this evening. And you start becoming more focused, and you start maybe even becoming more ambitious, and you might realize in the quiet of the evening that there are things you can be thinking about, things you can be doing, things that you can be planning and preparing, and there might be something quite secretive about it. But if you're not in the Americas, that may be more about tomorrow. So the pressure ideally should be off, but keep believing. I mean, it's very important that you believe and keep believing that things are working, because they are working. And when you think about the times in which you are living, we can be very negative about the times which we are living, but that maybe, Scorpio, you're actually tuned into it all. If you're honest with yourself, you do understand where it's all going, and you understand what people want, and this might give you an opportunity. And if you are connected with the world, and connected with the people in this world, you understand what they want, you understand what they don't want, and that just does give you an opportunity. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, okay, in general today, I think you are going to value your own company, but we shouldn't forget that Venus is starting to move towards that trine of Mars. Venus is now just 4 degrees from a trine to Mars, and so with that trine to Mars, that is just a reminder that your interpersonal skills are just improving. They're just getting better and better. And if you think about particular relationships, perhaps relationships which may not have gone 100% well in the past, you can perhaps see the possibilities there. And so if you are interacting with people who you care about, or you think you might care about, then look at the interactions. The interaction might not be perfect. It might not be anything you want at the moment, because I think there is something rather introspective about you today. But still, I think you can see possibilities. So it's important that you don't abandon anyone, or you don't cut yourself off from anyone. If you think there's any possibility that they might be useful in the future, or indeed you might be useful to them in the future. So as far as relationships are concerned, keep an open mind and just be aware that relationships in general, as an area of your life, are going to be improving, over the next few days as that Venus trine Mars becomes exact. I mean, I think it's more than a few days. I mean, I keep forgetting when that Venus trine Mars is exact. That Venus trine Mars is exact. Venus is exactly trine Mars. Oh, it's not. It's on around the 21st of May. So in fact, we're talking about something over a couple of weeks. So over the next fortnight, the whole area of relationships for you is just improving, and just be aware of it, and it's another reason to be optimistic. Sagittarius, we've got the moon moving into Libra, and with the moon moving into Libra, you may feel that your social skills are good, or at least improving. and at the same time, you're feeling that you want to be with people. You can see the benefits of other people, and so it's not a time, Sagittarius, when you want to be sort of entirely alone. I think if you do spend the day alone, you just might feel that you're missing out on something. And so, do avail yourself of whatever social opportunities might be around. But you don't want to take things too far. The moon is making an opposition to Neptune. It's also making an opposition to Venus, and so with those oppositions, things may not necessarily be entirely clear, and your creative interests and your social interests may at times be at odds with one another. You might, for example, have some absolutely great ideas that are developing, ideas that are very unique to you, but having to relate these ideas to other people, to your friends, for example, may not be such a good thing. People might not understand. And there's some danger, Sagittarius, that in your attempt to be liked, your attempt to be able to relate to the social world, you might find yourself abandoning or forgetting some aspects of your core creativity, or you may even start to water your creativity down. And so I think you need to get a perspective on other people, on the group. You need to be with people. It's a human function. It's something that is important to Sagittarius at the moment, but you don't have to be entirely with people, and some things maybe should just be kept to yourself. So socializing can be focused on particular areas, but it's probably not a good time to just be totally open about everything you're involved with, because if you're too open, maybe you'll just be revealing too much, and you might be weakening yourself, and you might start having negative feelings about something that's very important to you, and that's not something you want. And that can be the problem about being open. Isn't that the case? We have something, we're working on it, we're feeling really good about it, but as soon as we start talking about it, we have to start explaining ourselves. We start having to justify what we're doing, and in that process, we just feel bad. And so that's not a situation, Sagittarius, that you really want to be in. But it's unnecessary. Socializing can be light, it can be harmless, and it doesn't need to involve any great reveal. Certainly you don't want to reveal things that are super important to you. And the moon does make a trine to Pluto, and when with this moon trine Pluto, you can make an impact, you can be noticed, and the things you say will not be entirely trivial. People will listen to you, and so perhaps you can start to sort of exercise your power in a gentle way. But again, it's not about revealing anything. It may even be about playing games. Seeing how people respond to you. Sagittarius has a reputation for being a very sort of open and honest, perhaps sometimes tactless sign. And moon in Libra, you might say, moon in Libra is about being polite and being aware of the balance, but it can work both ways. Moon in Libra can be aware of what upsets the balance, and perhaps you might feel you do want to upset the balance with that moon trine Pluto. And perhaps it needs to be done. perhaps people have become a little bit complacent and you need to change things a little, and that can, at the very least, make life more exciting. And additionally, this is a time, Sagittarius, where you can communicate very well, very effectively, and you can have an impact. Capricorn, you're starting to feel that you want to have a presence. You do want to be noticed, and this is good. You've got something to offer, you've got something to contribute, and you don't have to put up with anything. And if you feel that things aren't going in the right way, you can create change. And that is partly to do with the fact that the moon is trine Pluto, and with the moon trine Pluto, if you are involved in anything connected with career or status or ambitions or professions, then that moon trine Pluto, it allows you to have an impact and to get noticed. And it's because you're able to point out the things that matter. Maybe some people are just ignoring the key points, but you know what those key points are. It might, for example, be money. People have been forgetting about the financial aspect of things. They kind of think that money is going to sort itself out all by itself. As a Capricorn, that's not the case. And if you do talk about money in quite a public way, I think that people will notice you, and you're perhaps feeling the fact that Pluto is now in Aquarius. Pluto is going to be in Aquarius until the 2040s, and with Pluto in Aquarius in the Capricorn chart, that is about rethinking your attitude to money and having a particular attitude to your finances and perhaps other people's finances as well, to the whole concept of money. And perhaps that is your job to completely change one's ideas about the material side of things. And just so now with moon trine Pluto, you can really start to point it out, and you can use the power of Pluto in Aquarius. And so if you're going into work today, I think that you have an opportunity to have quite a powerful impact. And it's important, though, to be very direct and to stick to the plan. You don't want to be undermined. The moon, yes, it does make an opposition to Pluto. It does also make an opposition to Neptune. It does make an opposition to Venus. So you may have to deal with people and situations which on the surface do seem confusing. They might be distracting, but you can't constantly have to move to take into account of these distractions. You just have to say, yes, there is an obstacle. There are things that are trying to pull you off the track, but you can actually perhaps just ignore them. 90% ignore them. You can be aware of them in a sort of vaguely emotional way, and you can change your style and approach just a bit to take into account a confusing situation or confusing people. But you don't want to, as I've said, you don't want to change the plan. You don't want to change the program. You want to continue in the same direction. Make a few adjustments on the way, but that is going to be the best approach. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, well, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, the day is dominated actually by a moon opposition Saturn, and So in Australia and New Zealand, it may be that it's not a great day for relationships. Saturn is your ruler, and the Moon is ruler of Cancer, your opposite sign. So certainly in Australia and New Zealand, relationships could be somewhat strained. And one reason for the strain might be the fact that you are quite tough and you are standing up for your own interests, and the other person might not appreciate that. Now, if you're not in Australia or New Zealand, if you're in Europe and particularly America, that Moon opposition Saturn is not going to be such a big deal. It's more about Moon opposition, Moon opposition Venus, Moon opposition Neptune. I mean, I don't think that relationships should be the be-all and end-all of your day. And in fact, yeah, they could be a distraction. So don't take relationships too seriously, and don't try too hard to accommodate other people and their short-term whims, because I don't think that would be helpful, and I don't think you'd be particularly respected. So I think, Capricorn, you just need to do what's best for yourself, and relationships should be secondary at best. Aquarius, it's a relatively quiet day. Actually, it's a quiet day for everyone, really. I mean, at least in an astrological sense. I mean, this is why in my forecast of the 12 signs, I'm being, I think, quite a lot briefer than usual. Now, as far as you're concerned, the Moon is moving into Libra, and Moon moving into an air sign, and I think that is something you appreciate, having the Moon in Libra. It's certainly better than the Moon in Virgo. I think with the Moon in Virgo, you didn't feel great about it, and you might have felt that things weren't quite working the way you'd liked. Things were maybe more complicated, or more complicated than you'd like them to be, that is. And additionally, you just found it difficult to be yourself. But now with the Moon moving into Libra, things are easier. You can be more open-minded, and it feels that more possibilities are available. Now, the Moon in Libra does make a few aspects. So it makes an opposition to Venus and Neptune, and it makes a trine to Pluto. So Moon opposition Venus and Neptune, these aspects are confusing. And I think one manifestation of Moon opposition these two planets, particularly the Moon opposition Neptune, may just be that it's very difficult to know what's important and what is a distraction. You're trying to work things out, and you're trying to evaluate things that come your way, and so what matters and what is just completely trivial. And Moon opposition Neptune may encourage you to regard something as being really important. This is the detail that matters. I've just discovered this incredible fact, and it changes everything. And in fact, it may be nothing. It may just be just something that looks impressive in the short term, but longer term it has no consequence. So try not to get too excited about anything, and if you have a sudden realization, then it may not be as dramatic as it feels. So don't be melodramatic, and avoid hyperbole, avoid exaggeration. Things may actually be quite simple, and the difficult bit may be distinguishing between what matters and what doesn't matter, and that could be hard work, and it may actually be impossible short term. You realize things, and it may be an important realization. It could be nothing, and you don't know. and somehow you have to hold everything together and be in that position where you just don't know. So that moon opposition Venus, and also moon opposition Neptune just could be exhausting, because you're just trying to work out, what matters, and there's a lot of false information around. But maybe the aspect you should be concentrating on is moon trine Pluto. And that moon trine Pluto, for you Aquarius, I would have said is an aspect that is entirely favourable. Pluto is in your sign, and you're getting used to Pluto being in your sign. Okay, I know that Pluto's been in your sign since November, but still, it is a big change, and it allows you to really understand what's going on, and you can be part of it. You can be part of the change. So it's not like you having to respond to outside events. You can be the change that everyone else is having to respond to. And so perhaps with moon trine Pluto, this is an opportunity to tune into who you are and what the change is, what kind of change you can bring about, and allow yourself to be inspired. Now, as I've just said, some of your inspirations might be fake, and it's going to be difficult to know which is which, but just be open to the possibility that you can be inspired, and sometimes you'll just know it. And if something is simple and direct, and it might then feel obvious, then maybe that's the inspiration you're looking for. But if you have a genuine inspiration, and you can avoid that moon opposition Neptune and the fake inspiration, so that that's a challenge today, working out what's real and what's not real. But if you feel a change is required, if you have an inspiration about change, then you can actually make it happen, or at least you can start making it happen. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, Mars is still moving through Leo. It's in your opposite sign, of course, and so this is a period lasting until June, where relationships are not always going to be easy, and some people are going to be pretty stubborn. And today in particular, some people's behavior might be a little bit erratic and unpredictable, and some people might make mistakes or do things they hadn't planned on doing. So watch out for other people's behavior, and do what you can to be a moderating force. So, some people may do things which are regrettable, and so if you have an opportunity to protect someone from doing something stupid, then maybe that's something you can do. You can sort of pull someone back off the brink. I mean, that there is that possibility. But again, I don't want to exaggerate there. But in certain cases, certain people could be a law unto themselves, and you need to be aware of that, and you need to ask yourself, well, can you do anything about it? Because some people just won't be told. Pisces, you are feeling that you've got something to say, and you're able to say it with a certain amount of power. But it's important that you have confidence in yourself. You might sort of wonder whether you really know what you're doing. But, if you really believe in yourself, you can come over as someone who is really quite serious and quite intense. And I think in most cases, people really are going to listen to you. And once people start listening to you, they're going to want more. So it really is a great opportunity to say what's on your mind, again, with power. And you can express your emotion in a useful way, and you can adjust your approach as things change. So you're going to be very good at tuning into your audience and giving them what they want, telling them what they want to hear. And okay, you don't want to tell them entirely what they want to hear. You've got a message to give. You cannot dilute your message, but you can adjust your message, or at least adjust the delivery of a message, so that in the end, people understand who you are and what you're about. And generally speaking, Pisces, there are a few areas that you can't get involved with. I think in your own way, you're quite brave at the moment. You can go to places. I mean, when I say places, I don't necessarily mean geographical places, but sort of areas of knowledge or mental spaces which in the past you might have been a little bit uncomfortable with, but you go there and you can really understand what's happening, and you'll have the sufficient bravery to ask the right questions. So knowledge can be found. It could be hard work, but I do think that you will get there in the end. And it's not a time to be saying to yourself, well, you don't know, you don't care. No, if you've got a question, whatever that question is, Pisces, it is important that you ask that question and you demand an answer, and you don't want to be fobbed off with some kind of half-truth. No, you've got to go for the whole truth. And there's no such thing as a bad truth. Truth in itself is a virtue. Whatever that truth might be. So keep asking, keep exploring, and as far as your ability to communicate, I think your ability to communicate today is going to be very good, and I think it's going to be very powerful. So don't hold back. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for 12 signs. I think a lot briefer than usual, but astrologically there wasn't a great deal happening today, so there's no point in just talking a lot just for the sake of it. So let me now turn to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 32, duration, which I've had quite recently. And the thing is, this hexagram duration has no moving lines. And this seems to fit in with the astrology, because when I did my readings for the 12 signs, I think I was pretty brief. I don't think I had a great deal to say, and astrologically there wasn't much going on. And so duration with no moving lines, regardless of what duration actually means, I don't think it's going to necessarily be a day where much is going to be going on. And duration is all about just staying with it. That's all it's about, just staying with it. You've decided to do something, and you just go for it, and you go with it, and you don't get distracted, and you just keep going. And you could say that is all there is to be said. Now, why would it be a good idea to just keep going, not changing your course? Well, we could look at the nuclear hexagram, the hexagram in the middle of this hexagram, if we knock off the top and bottom lines, to get a hexagram which has got these three unbroken lines at the bottom, and this trigram here, the second, third, fourth and fifth lines at the top. And so if we look at the nuclear hexagram, it's breakthrough. And so part of a reason why we need to keep going, we need to not be distracted, is maybe because we are aware of some kind of threat. Now, breakthrough is about a threat. It's about a situation where we may need to take urgent action in order to prevent some kind of catastrophe. We get warnings. We hear that other people are in trouble, and that trouble could spread to us. And so there is an awareness of danger, and we need to do something about it quickly. And so let's go back to duration. Now, what I just said about breakthrough and danger, it doesn't apply to us, but it's just something to be aware of. Why do we keep doing the same thing? Why do we keep going in the same direction? Why don't we allow ourselves to be distracted? Because we need to stay centered. Because there is danger around us. If we lose touch with what we're doing, if we get distracted, especially today we've got Moon opposition Neptune, there are plenty of distractions around today. And if we get distracted, we may make ourselves vulnerable. But if we're not distracted, keep going, and we really are able to see things through to the end, then I think that things should be fine. So, I don't think today really there's very much to worry about. And let me finish off by talking about Germany. So I noticed that Germany has a new Chancellor. So what happened was, just a reminder, I don't know really anything about German politics, but I do know that Chancellor Merz did well. He's now Chancellor, but Friedrich Merz, he was the largest party after the elections, and it took a long time, to a lot of negotiations, until the German Parliament was ready to elect him Chancellor. At first time he didn't succeed, didn't get enough votes, so they had to have another vote straight away, and that other vote went, and then he got sworn in. So I took the swearing in as the key moment, not the actual time he got enough votes in the second vote. So it's the swearing in that matters as far as I'm concerned. So here is the chart for the swearing in. Let's see. But when Friedrich Merz became Chancellor, sorry, that's a solar direction. That's not what I wanted. So this is the chart for him being sworn in. Now, I'd looked around for the time on which he was sworn in, and my first efforts were not particularly successful. But then I found a YouTube video which was a live coverage of the swearing in. This went on for ages and ages, and it was this picture of the German Parliament, and there was a little clock. You could see the Parliament clock, and so you could see roughly what time it was, and then it panned in to the actual swearing in. You couldn't see the clock anymore, but then I was able to note the position of the YouTube video at the time it panned in, and I zeroed it in. I saw what the position it was when it switched from 1659 to 1700, when it was exactly 5 o'clock. So I think I worked out that the precise time, correct me if I'm wrong, but the precise time he became Chancellor, I made it as 5:31:55 p.m. So just after 5:30 in the afternoon. I'm fairly confident about this, and so this is the time he became Chancellor. And so you could say that this chart may say something about his success or failure as a Chancellor. And we've also got his own chart to look at. We don't have a time of birth for him. I mean, I looked for the time of birth just before making this video, just to make sure that something hadn't sort of come up at the last moment. I made that mistake with Carney. I made a video about Carney's chart, and I thought I didn't have a time of birth, and I didn't check beforehand. Yeah, there was a time of birth, and I was corrected for that. But I don't think we still have a time of birth birth for Merz. And so I think that the moment he becomes Chancellor, yeah, it does matter. Now, one good thing about this chart that might particularly help him at the beginning of his chancellorship is the fact that the moon is trine the sun. Very simple, very obvious from a lunar cycle perspective. This was a good time for Merz to become Chancellor. So we had the new moon on April the 27th, and the moon is at 10 degrees Virgo when he became Chancellor, so it was trine the sun. It's applying to a trine to the sun. The moon doesn't make any aspects before it makes the sun, so there is something harmonious about that moment where it came together. And I saw watched the video, everyone was politely clapping after he was sworn in, and not that I speak German, but you can just get an idea about what's going on. And so that is something which is good about this chart. On the other hand, Libra is rising, and 14 degrees 40 Libra rising, and I'll be talking about that in a moment in sort of more detail. But it does mean that the ruler of the ascendant is going to be Venus. And now I would question whether Venus was in an especially good position. Venus is in Aries. It's in its detriment. And it's in the 7th from a Placidus view. It's it's in the sixth house from a Placidus point of view. It's in the 7th house if you're into whole signs. So there's something rather weak about that Venus, and that may say something about his chancellorship. And of course, Venus is quite close to Neptune, and so that Venus, that Neptune, it says Mercury in Aries. Venus, Neptune, Mercury in Aries. It's going to be problematic. Not least because we've got Saturn and Neptune Neptune's already in Aries. Neptune is going to transit. Neptune is soon going to make a conjunction to his Venus to this Chancellor chart. Saturn and Neptune are going to transit that Venus pretty soon. In fact, they're going to transit the descendant. So this is a problem. So Saturn is it's currently obviously at 28 Pisces, so it goes into Aries. It goes retrograde in Aries. It doesn't get very far into Aries, but next year, Saturn, I think it's July, Saturn goes stationary retrograde at 14. I think at 14 Aries. So it may be the case that short term things look good. His chancellorship, new beginning for Germany. Is it really a new beginning? I mean, we shouldn't forget it's a coalition. He's supported by the SPD, and so not a great deal has changed. And of course, the support for the war in Ukraine is going to continue, probably intensify. So, same problem. Is how long before the Merz runs into real problems? But we should not forget that the moon is trine the sun, and that does provide a certain amount of stability. And if you're trying to create a coalition, then having moon trine sun is pretty good, because it kind of keeps the parts of the coalition together. And if you're interested in midpoints, and if you're interested particularly in hypothetical midpoints, and we look at, sorry, that's the wrong, that was the wrong one. So if we want to look at the hypothetical planets, let me just show you what I mean. If we put on the hypotheticals, Hades is at 1312 Cancer. Now that means that Hades is exactly conjunct the Sun-Moon midpoint. So it was very nice that the Sun and the Moon were in trine. But what's not so nice is Hades on the Sun-Moon midpoint. You know, Hades is a planet of death, perhaps criminality, garbage, and things going wrong. So Alfred Witter, in his Rules for Planetary Pictures, when he talks about Hades on the Sun-Moon midpoint, he says Hades on the Sun-Moon midpoint. He says miserable married life, partnership, or friendship, the prostitute, sad hours, dealing with disagreeable matters on a daily basis. And I kind of like that when he's talking about a coalition. Miserable married life, partnership, or friendship. So that Sun-Moon trine, which on the surface looked so good in terms of creating harmony, it may be forced harmony, and it may all be pretty miserable. And just having to, as Witter says, dealing with disagreeable matters on a daily basis. So that Hades is very, very close to the Sun-Moon midpoint. And so I don't think that we should ignore that. You know, the Sun-Moon midpoint in astrology really does matter. It's the most, every chart you should look at the Sun-Moon midpoint and see if any planets are on it. And it's not just that Hades is making a semi-square or a sesquiquadrate to the Sun-Moon midpoint. It is conjunct the Sun-Moon midpoint. So it just may be that this coalition is just going to be a real chore. It's going to be a joyless coalition. And that may be a feature. But we know we shouldn't just look at one point. And you could argue that Hades is a hypothetical planet, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything. But, you know, as far as I'm concerned, Hades is a planet which actually works pretty well. So that's the time that Merz becomes Chancellor. So when do we think that there could be the first crisis? Well, I was looking through at future lunations, and I noticed that on October the 7th, there is a full moon. And so here is the full moon. The full moon is at 1409 Aries. So this full moon is exactly on the ascendant of the moment when Merz was sworn in as Chancellor. So let me just show you this. So there's the ascendant at 1440, and this full moon is at 1409 Libra. So this full moon could be quite important, and it may be that this full moon we really start to see the reality of this coalition, what it's all about. And full moons are about, obviously, opposition, sun-moon opposition, the conflict. Perhaps the two parties in the coalition, I think it's two, mainly the socialists and the Christian Democrats, just not really getting on with one another. And this full moon, additionally, is pretty difficult for Germany. So if we look at that full moon set for Berlin, because it's at 5:48 a.m. Berlin time, the ascendant is at 27:30 Virgo, and Saturn is at 2718 Pisces. So that means that this full moon is exactly going through Berlin. It's exactly on the ascendant. Sorry, let me say it again. Saturn, at the time of that full moon, Saturn is exactly on the descendant. Now, Saturn might represent enemies. Russia, for example, how's the war going? But it could be internal enemies. And it could be events happening which are really not very fortunate for Germany. So let me just do an astro map of that full moon set for Germany to show you this. So here's Germany, and so there's Germany, and so this is the exact moment of a full moon, and these are all of the places which have Saturn on the descendant, and you can see that this yellow line goes very closely through very close to Berlin, probably, I don't know, maybe 10-20 kilometers away from Berlin. So it's pretty close. So I think that this full moon could be a problem, not just because Saturn is on the descendant, but because the full moon itself is right on the ascendant, is right opposition the ascendant of when Merz became Chancellor. Now, as far as Friedrich Merz's chart is concerned, don't have a time of birth. It is somewhat unsatisfactory, I would have said. So here's Friedrich Merz. He's born on November the 11th, 1955. We don't know what time he was born. He does have a moon in Libra. He'll have a moon anywhere between 6 or 7 Libra and 20 Libra. So that's a big range of possibilities. I mean, that does mean that sometime over the next year he's going to have Saturn opposition his moon, and he's certainly going to have Saturn opposition his Mars in 2027. So he does have a few Saturn issues there. Uranus has kind of already done its damage. So you can see he's got his Sun at 18 Scorpio, Saturn. He's got Sun-Saturn conjunction. Uranus has already made the squares to that, so he doesn't perhaps have to worry too much about Uranus transits. Although, if we looked at his solar return for last year, again, don't have a time of birth, so there's a limit to what we can do. So, in his solar return, Sun was at 18. This is for November of last year. The Sun was in Scorpio opposition Uranus, and the Sun was about 7 degrees from making the opposition to Uranus. And when you're looking at solar returns, it's often useful to see the degrees as symbolic of 1 month. So if you count 7 degrees, and you take that as 7 months. So 7 months into his birthday, I think takes us probably to about June 2025 this year, which is close enough to when he became Chancellor. So him becoming Chancellor is a very Sun opposition Uranus experience for him. It's nothing easy. It's something dramatic, even traumatic. So I'm not convinced he's going to have a great deal of fun as Chancellor of Germany. I mean, obviously he's very happy now he is Chancellor, but how long is that happiness going to last for? And as far as the transits, the transits that Merz is experiencing at the moment, and to be more specific about it. There we go. So as far as the transits are concerned, things to watch out for. Okay, he's got Mercury at 5 degrees Scorpio. So next year he's going to have Pluto square his Mercury, because Pluto's just gone retrograde. So Pluto got pretty close to the square of his Mercury, but didn't go all the way. So next year he's got Pluto squaring his Mercury. So that may be about him realizing a lot of stuff, realizing the truth about things, and that might be quite difficult for him. And as I've already said, he, over the next few years, he will have Saturn at some stage aspecting his Moon-Mars conjunction, but we don't know exactly when that is. But Saturn opposition Moon, Saturn opposition Mars, Saturn, I think 2027 he's going to have Saturn opposition his Mars. But that's that is not something great. So he is going to be under a certain amount of pressure there. That is true, and that's coming up. Then his solar arc directions. I think his solar arc directions, if again, it's always difficult to use solar arc directions when you don't have a time of birth. But I'm going to try. So his solar arc directions, which sorry, let's start again. Okay, so here is. So remember, Merz. He was born in 1950. He's born in 1955. So in fact, he's coming up to his 70th birthday. So with a solar arc direction, we would be moving everything 70 degrees. So here we have it. It's okay. So there are his solar arc directions. So a few points to make. His solar arc directed Mars is at around 29 Sagittarius. So his solar arc Mars is coming up to the solstice point, and that will happen over the next year or two, probably next year, 6 months. No, actually not less than 2 years. So Mars moving to the solstice point. That represents some kind of conflict. Again, maybe the consequences of what's going on in Ukraine. It could be, of course, conflict going on within Germany. What is Germany going to do if the AfD keeps on getting more and more support? Are they just going to ban the AfD? I mean, I think the AfD have already been declared an extremist organization. Well, what happens if they ban the AfD? Are they going to be able to deal with that? I think that would be quite a dangerous thing to do. And additionally, his solar arc directed Sun is at 29 degrees Capricorn. So it's making a square to Neptune at the moment. That is arguably the main solar arc direction right now. And with solar arc directed Sun square the Neptune, is this a man that really knows what's going on? Does he really, really understand it? Does he understand what's happening in his country? And is he able to make good decisions? And, Friedrich Merz does have one thing in common with Donald Trump. He has no traditional planets in Earth signs. In fact, he has no planets in Earth signs at all. And, one wonders about that. Here is someone who is supposedly very sensible, was he a banker before he got into politics, but he has no planets in Earth. Does he understand what's really important in a material sense? Does he really get it? And there might be a certain ungroundedness that he has in terms of his big plans, raising loads of money, borrowing but lots of money for infrastructure and defense, saying they're going to be able to not have to rely on Russian gas after 2027. All the other stuff that a politician has to deal with, a German politician, there may be a certain ungroundedness in him anyway, but then he's got Neptune making a semi-square to, making a solar arc directed Neptune making a square to his Sun. Really, that doesn't help, does it? And additionally, Saturn, his solar arc directed Saturn is at 343 Aquarius. So in other words, over the next year, his solar arc directed Saturn is going to be making a square to his Mercury at the same time as transiting Pluto is going to be making a square to his Mercury. Now, I think that could be a real problem. Saturn square Mercury, you could say depression, of the realization of how bad things are. Plus, you throw Pluto in as well. So I do think that there is a problem there. And finally, I just want to look at the chart of Germany. And so here is the chart of, here's the horoscope of Germany. I never know quite which chart to use, whether you use the chart for Bonn, because at the time of German reunification, Bonn was the capital of Germany. So do you take it for Bonn or do you take it for Berlin? The advantage of taking for Berlin, there's something special about Berlin. It's a new capital. And so from a symbolic perspective, maybe one should take Berlin rather than Bonn, though I'm not sure which one to go for. I mean, if you wants to be technical about it, one would go for Bonn, but I'm going for Berlin. Of course, East Berlin was the capital of East Germany, so I think that there are grounds for using Berlin rather than Bonn. And so here's the chart of Germany at the time of Merz becoming Chancellor. One aspect that Germany was having or starting to have was Pluto on the 7th house cusp. And Pluto on the 7th house cusp doesn't quite get there because Pluto is now going retrograde. And so that may be a note for the future, a note for next year. And Pluto on the 7th house, again, Germany and its enemies. Again, what happens in Ukraine? How is Germany going to actually deal with Ukraine losing, for example? Of course, we don't know what losing means in terms of the war, because I don't think that Russia's war aims are quite as dramatic as some people in the West try to claim. I mean, I know it's true sort of historically that people who declare war on Russia, it always ends up with Russian troops in their own capital, doesn't it? I mean, that's with Napoleon and Hitler, it always ended up with Russian troops in Paris or Russian troops in Berlin in 1945. I don't think it's going to be quite like that, is it? But Pluto on the 7th is a note for the future. I don't think it necessarily says much about the current situation. And when Merz became when Merz became Chancellor, Venus was at 3 degrees Aries. Now, unified Germany has its Venus at 1 degree Libra. So Venus in early Libra, well, that tells us straight away that in 2026, Saturn is going to be making an opposition to Germany's Venus, and it's going to be making a conjunction to Saturn to Venus. To the Venus at the time that Merz became Chancellor. So Saturn is going to be causing major issues, both to Merz and to Germany. And additionally, the Sun, Germany's Sun is at 929 Libra, and its descendant is at 10 degrees 38 Libra. So that tells us again, in 2026, next year, Saturn is hitting Germany's Sun, and it's hitting Germany's IC. So I think that this represents a lot of problems for Germany next year. But I just think that short term, over the next few months, it should be okay. And I don't think that the problems really start for Germany, and in particular for Merz and his regime. I don't think they really start until October. with that full moon. I think with that full moon right on the ascendant of him becoming Chancellor, and also that full moon we've got Saturn exactly on the descendant set for Berlin. So I think we've got problems from the autumn onwards, but maybe short term it'll be okay. So those are a few random thoughts on Merz becoming Chancellor and the future of Merz and Germany over the next couple of years. I'll try to be more precise in a future video. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.